The first session is about let me find here, trends in technology-based health investment. Then Michael Kahn is also another member of this international advisory board, and let me say something about him. He is associate professor of epidemiology in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Colorado, Denver, and co-director of the Colorado Clinical and Translational Science Institute, biomedical informatics co-director and director of clinical informatics in the Department of Quality and Patient Safety at the Children's Hospital. He was working on real-time clinical decision support linked to clinical outcomes monitoring, clinical data warehouses, and integration of electronic medical records with prospective research. He has been member of the board of directors of the American Medical Informatics and the editorial board of the Journal of the American Medical Informatics Association and the International Journal of Medical Informatics. He's also a member of the American College of Medical Informatics. He's here also because in the last 2 years we have signed an agreement with Colorado University in Denver and UPM to be able to join together in moving biomedical aspects or technologies into the clinical practices. And then, in fact, as a part of it, and with the cooperation of the Biomedical Technology Center of the university, also located in this campus, we have signed to the creation of a joint master degree on translational sciences and clinical sciences that he will present it after that. Then he's for us very important and key people in the States to be able to move part of our technologies into the United States and then even to work together to develop new products and services. Then Michael, thank you very much for coming, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I appreciate speaking to you early in the morning. So we heard about failure. We heard about learning. We heard about fun. I'm going to talk about pain. Okay? Seems to be a theme these days. And in particular, where there's pain, there's opportunity. And where there's pain, there's the need for someone to innovate and make that pain go away. And so I've been asked to give a talk that describes opportunities where healthcare has a need, has a pain. And my hope is that someone in this room will recognize a solution to that pain, because these solutions know no boundaries. And somewhere in this room, there's someone who has a thought, an idea about how to solve one of the 6 pains that I've identified in the 30 minutes that I've asked to speak. I have to admit that this is particularly a USA orientation. That's where I live and that's where I know. But I think, again, many of the issues and many of the pain points in healthcare that I'm going to talk about are universal. And I've seen them in my visits to the Spanish health system here. And so some of these, not all of these, will be very recognizable locally. But again, I believe they are international pain points that are looking for innovation that I hope is sitting in this room somewhere. So we are having a bit of a problem with the... I tried this one. What did you do? That one, got it. Okay. So I was asked to talk about health IT, and health IT actually is a very broad landscape. And this diagram here really shows how broad when one is talking about biomedical information technology. On the far left on this slide are those who work in the areas of genomics and sequences in biological systems. Very basic. Many of these are doing new drug discovery or new disease therapies. Off to the far right of this spectrum of health IT are folks who are doing population and public health medicine, working with regions or with the entire country of Spain. And in the middle is where most of us live, with our healthcare, our individual practitioners, our hospitals, and our day-to-day concerns about both disease and wellness. And I'm going to spend most of my time only in the middle sector of this spectrum, But I put this slide up to remind all of us that the healthcare IT spectrum actually is very large, and we're only talking about a very small slice of clinical care and clinical practice, again, because that's where I live and that's what I do. So here's a prediction. Predictions are always interesting. Since 2015 will start in roughly 3 weeks. We'll see how well this prediction is. My prediction is that this is the end of the era of discussing big data, but that instead we'll stop talking about big data this year and we'll start talking about big data analytics. So people have been talking about big data for well over 5 years, and it's time now that we start to take those big data technologies and turn them into insights. And the reason for medicine sort of stopping to talk about, no longer talking about big data, but now talking about big data analytics, is because there's been a promise out there for many years about personalized medicine. And I have some slides coming up that will talk more about what I mean by that term, personalized medicine. That's also been a promise for many, many years, and it really hasn't happened. It really hasn't occurred that much in changing the practice of medicine. And I think with the big data, moving to big data analytics, this is the opportunity. Now, I've never thought that I would live to see the day when people who would have a figure like this, where DS, in this case, stands for data scientist. So the Harvard Business Review claimed that people like myself who do analytics with these large data sets have the sexiest job in the 21st century. Again, never thought that I'd ever be associated with such a label. Now, actually, I disagree with this moniker, because he calls it the sexiest job. I really think it should be the sexiest people, but I didn't get to write the article, so we'll have to go with the sexiest job. I'll take that if that's what we get. And I actually believe that 2015, in fact, is going to be the year for healthcare of the data scientists finally being able to convert data into really changes in healthcare. But we have some issues, and this is this unfilled promise of personalized medicine that, again, will start to go into the pain points of why are the barriers that this is not happening, and what I hope the innovations that will come from people in this room will help solve. So this slide is about 10 years old. It's slightly different now than it was then, but it still tells the same story. And that is, was one looks at the various major diseases in our populations and take a look and ask the question, how effective are the therapies and the medications that we have available for treating these these illnesses? How effective are they when we give them to our patients? And every blue person on that slide is an indication of the number of patients who do not respond to the therapies that we give them. The more blue, the less we know how to successfully treat these diseases. These are very common diseases, and yet our response rates are fairly poor across them. It's a little bit different now in cancer. Cancer has had successes since this slide, but the top 3, 4, 5 diseases, we still actually have fairly difficult time coming up with the right therapies for our patients. I work in pediatrics. In children, it's worse. So what is personalized medicine? What is the promise of personalized medicine? What are we not seeing? And what, again, we have some pain points coming up in a moment. The idea of personalized medicine is that sitting in this room are individuals who have different risks for different diseases. Somewhere in this room is someone who is at high risk for diabetes, someone else for lung cancer, someone else, half the room, for breast cancer, the other half of the room for prostate cancer. But we don't know who you are. We know you're out there. Statistically, we know you're there, but we don't know who you are. And the idea of personalized medicine is that we'd have the ability through data to be able to identify who's at risk. Take those people who are at risks and understand that some of them will, in fact, go on to more significant diseases and others won't. Those with low risk we can follow. Those with high risk we need to intervene. And for those that we intervene, that we are going to do something that we can tell what it is that we're supposed to do that will work for you. And it may be different depending on who you are and what disease that you have. Now, over the last 5 to 10 years, we've been getting better at that very last step. about doing some tests about you and being able to understand whether treatment A or treatment B will be effective. But we are basically nowhere, except for one example, which I'll give in a slide later, for any of the earlier steps. And again, this is a data issue, that we have the data, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the analytics. So healthcare, I think, is undergoing a tremendous change. This is why I believe this is the era of health big data analytics. And to the left, in the past, what we've had are people who have done descriptions of diseases. You look at a person, you see a rash, you describe the rash. You look under the microscope, you describe some cells. It's descriptive. We're moving progressively more and more into becoming a quantitative science. Now, when I say that healthcare is becoming more quantitative, most people think about the genome, because that's where the bigness of big data has been occurring. And this slide is a famous slide showing just how quickly the explosion has occurred in the ability to, and the lowering of the cost, and therefore the number of genomes that we are able to sequence over the past multiple years. Moore's law is this law associated with Gordon Moore, basically said that computing doubled in capacity every 18 months. That's what that white line is. And what you can see here is that the capacity to be able to create massive data sets has grossly exceeded Moore's law. There is a warning in this slide, and that is over the last 4 years, that curve has flattened. We've kind of stalled out at this point at the $5,000 genome. We're looking for that next sort of generation of technology to get the genome costs down. But that's actually not the data that I'm talking about here, that I believe that the next revolution and the ability to see personalized medicine is about, and the innovations that I'm hoping that someone in this room will solve. It's this view of big data. The genome in this view is simply, let's see at the pointer, no. So the genome is this box here. But as you can see from the slide, there's a lot more data that we have about an individual person through their life that involves all the other aspects of their biology above the genome, and then the world in which we all live in, the society, the environment, the social media world that we all live in. These are all data that are being generated about all of us every single day. And it's this totality of data that really constitutes the experience that our bodies and our physiology sort of undergoes every day. I'm going to take this slide and I'm going to put it in a more data-centric perspective, and then we'll go into the pain points. This is a hard slide to read because it's very busy, and it's intentional that way. You will not be tested at the end of this lecture on this slide. Its busyness is, in fact, the message. And the message is that there's a lot of data on us in all kinds of different sources and formats and locations, of different quality, of different structure, of different specificity, and it's all out there, and it's all electronic. And we just can't put it together. It's right there in front of us, and we don't know how to put it together into a comprehensive picture of who we are as individuals and what makes us different and special. And so, for that person that's out there, solve pain point number one is figure out how to integrate these data and put these data together so that we can get a view of every single patient from not just the medical perspective, but their social perspective and everything else about their life in which they live in, so that we can get that full picture of what it means to be an individual for that personalized view, personalized medicine. Solve this, and the rest is easy. Now, I've mentioned the one exception to the personalized medicine rule, and it's really oncology. Oncology has led the way in this idea of personalized medicine. And 25 years ago, a woman who had breast cancer, it was absolutely clear what you did with that cancer. You cut it out. You cut out a whole lot of stuff. You did a radical surgery, you gave hormones, and you hit hard with very toxic chemotherapy. We don't do that anymore. But that's what you did 25 years ago. Now, we do very specific tests On the tumor cells, we know exactly what the receptors are, and we have highly targeted therapy that really is directed to the specific lesion that's generating that cancer. And if anybody has followed the Angelina Jolie story about the use of prophylactic mastectomy for individuals who have high risk with the BRCA1 gene, we also know that this is an area in which we in fact have a tumor marker, a risk marker for the risk of being able to develop future breast cancer and ovarian cancer. The other place in which there is some light about what this looks like in terms of being able to tailor our treatment to every single differently for every person who is in this room is a project that's coming out of Vanderbilt University, where they have a panel of markers, of gene markers, that will help predict how an individual will either respond or not respond to a given therapy, and or the risk of having an adverse event to the use of those therapies. And this panel then provides insights into whether or not to prescribe one set of medications or another set of medications for a specific individual. This is the future of how we'll be prescribing. So investment number 2 is figure out how to make these panels, figure out how to put them together so that we understand what will work and won't work and where the adverse events are going to happen in each individual so we don't use those medicines. We have a lot of knowledge out there. We have publications that are exploding, and the number of new experiments and new results coming out on every level of how we think about of health and wellness and disease. The publications explode. And there's no possible way that any one person can possibly know what's going on and what's relevant to the treatment of an individual. And so the idea of merging the exploding research data with the clinical information that I have about you and pairing those together and say, how does the research data apply to you, is another challenge. And so pain point number 3 for someone out there to solve is help put these together and create the knowledge integration tools and the knowledge content tools that will allow me to have this information when you are sitting in front of me, or in my case, your children are sitting in front of me. Another idea is that the idea of continuously learning. That is, every day, every patient, every interaction leads to the betterment of everybody else's care who comes after you. In this slide, what I'm showing is the children's hospital where I work on the left cycle, the adult hospital on the right side. Right now, today, what we do is simply the top half of that circle. We only use our current internal operational data to help drive our own decision-making locally. What we do not do is the lower half of both circles, where we bring those data together, we integrate those data together and do the deep analysis and the deep mining and the predictive modeling. We don't do that. That's the big data analytics. And so for someone out there, solve this problem, please. And that is to create new tools and new methods for doing this deep data mining, the data discovery and implementation platforms that allow me to be able to use these data that we are generating on our own. Now, this is a slide from Danny Sands, taken from an article from the Washington Post this year that says, others have recognized this need. And IBM, under the Watson program, has put $1 billion into data discovery and data mining. And just to take you down to the last bullet on this slide, Watson, which typical, has previously started out as a room full of computing resources, is now 3 pizza boxes. So you can get this deep computing capability for a stack that's this high. So we have the capability, we just don't know how to do it. Changing gears a little bit and going to consumer health and wellness, another area of active activity. If you haven't seen this website, I urge you to go see it, www.iodine.com. It's a consumer-oriented website created by former editor of Wired magazine and a former Google engineer. And it's one of these crowdsourced kind of ideas where thousands and thousands of patients who visit this site provide their personal experiences with their medications, and this feeds back to those who visit this site. What are patients saying about their medications? What are patients saying about what works well and what doesn't work well? It's a beautiful website. It really has thought through how to present complex information to patients. So you should spend some time on this one. And it's been called the Yelp. It's the Yelp of medicine, you know. However, the problem here is they don't have a business model yet. And in some sense, that's okay. Many of the startup companies in Silicon Valley that ultimately have become very successful had no business model when they started. They'll figure it out. I don't know what it'll look like, but this is, again, the idea of let's see where this goes. This is just a view of one of their infographics that's been made for patients, and in the interest of time, I'll move forward a little bit quicker. Again, in the consumer space, you know, there's the need, there's the growing desire for creating technologies that allow patients to take care of themselves. Investment number 5, and I have a question mark here because I don't know what this looks like, is to help drive this consumer-driven health and wellness. It has uncertain business models. We won't know what this looks like, but this is an area, again, where patients need to be able to take control of their own care. They know themselves far better than I do, and they need to be able to be active participants in their care. And finally, number 6 is kind of boring. It's not very medical, but it's actually quite important. And that is using big data to detect fraud, and in particular, drug abuse. In the United States, there's many millions of Americans that sort of go doctor shopping. They go from one place to another, to another, to another, to try to get prescription medications that they can abuse. A new system that was able to do this data integration and bring data together was able to sort of make this detection that patients were going to multiple physicians. And in New York City, at the very last bullet, in the first 3 days that such an integrated system went into play, they identified 200 cases of patients who were in fact doctor shopping for prescription medications. Not very exciting, but also impactful of how data that comes together that currently is disparate can in fact be used. So that's a very quick tour of 6 opportunities, going from very clinical sort of to very mundane. All involve data, all involve data synthesis, data integration, and all convert us from a focus on big data to using big data, from putting it together to analyzing it, from big data to big data analytics. And I'm hoping that 2015, one of you will solve one of those 6 big data analytics problems. And I'd love to sort of partner and participate in any ideas that you have. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in the International Advisory Board. I'm finished.
Okay. We can use some minutes for questions. Do you have any question to Michael? Because I would like to know something. You said that at the end, many of the business models behind that are not clear.
Just most of the consumer ones, yes.
Yeah. And then it's true that many of the new players in this field are new startups that have started to work in the United States. But it is also clear that many big players are also moving very rapidly to these kind of things, trying to use the huge machinery behind the big data, etc., and then to move to this market. What is the trend here into the concept of ecosystems around the medical use of big data? It's a combination of a lot of startups are trying to create new things, or just is a transition process until the typical big players will enter into the field with their own products? Or no, we are in a radically different type of stakeholder.
Yeah, I think the medical HIT world, and again, I'm speaking mostly from the US perspective, really is split into two very different communities. There is the enterprise players, the enterprise system players, the ones that develop your entire hospital system, HIT, your whole billing systems. Those are the big players, very well established and very traditional players. I think in the analytics side, it's still wide open greenfield. In the analytics side, the small player, the niche, startups, the innovators, in fact, run the roost at this moment. Will they be absorbed? Will that ultimately end up sort of being married to? Or will they in fact develop their own environment that's separate from the enterprise systems? Obviously, the enterprise systems are feeding the analytics, but as you see from one of my other slides, I believe that actually the success of analytics will come from many different sources, and therefore there won't be a dominant player there. So I actually believe on the analytics side, there is ample opportunity for small ecosystems around that to exist outside of the large players.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go. Very good. Yeah. Oh, please.
Good morning and thanks for your presentation. That was very interesting. And now let me go to another angle that is regarding health. We have our own evolution of our health depending on many different matters. And that health is influenced by things we are doing and external matters that are happening. Some of the things that can influence our health, on one side is we exercise to have a better health on one side, and in parallel, we have a certain type of diet that also influences our health. Depending on the type of exercise we are doing and the diet we are having, that health has many chances to be influenced. How far we are today to take the information on the exercise we are doing, and there are already many sensors and applications that can take that information and put that information into a complete type of solution, having a global view. And also on the other side, having the information of the things we are eating or being part of our diet that also can influence the health we are having. How far we are to have a global solution combining all those elements into an information that is useful for us and also for the doctors.
So there's many different ways to approach the answer to your question, because I think you picked on exercise and food, but there's also your work environment and the stress that you have at work. There is the air that you breathe, both at work and at home. It's the traffic that you have to put up with when you're sort of going from home. I mean, there is a sort of wherever you put a boundary, there is yet more beyond that boundary that also influence. So, you know, we are on the verge of obviously sort of continuously wearable sensors that will get at more and more of these activities. The food, there already are applications that you can take a picture of what you're eating right now, and that will convert it into the nutrients, ingredients, its calories, its fat content, and put that into a database. This moment, that database sits separate. It's another little cloud separate from your exercise that you might be getting from your wearable. It's separate then from sort of the blood pressure and the heart rate that's also being conducted. The separation is still, you know, the major issue. We know what your air quality is for where you live. It's separate. It's in something else completely different. Probably don't know what the stress is at your office, but maybe someday we'll have a stress meter also. So I think the sensor technologies are getting better, but at this moment it's causing even more fragmentation of the picture of you. The ability to integrate that and then come back to you and say this is what you should do and motivate you human motivation. We still, have a really difficult time understanding what change is hard. Change is really hard, and how to make give that information in a way that actually you will act on. I think this is where behavioral psychology still needs to have a long way to go. What are our motivations? How can we make that change? So even if we were to be able to do that, I still think we need to learn how to change people's behavior.
Okay, last question there. Whoa, lot of them.
Oh.
Yes.
Thank you.
We have 3 minutes more. It's a short question and answer.
Yeah, I have a startup targeting mHealth and in particular tools for doctors, information for doctors. And one of the dilemmas or one of the obstacles that we have is the role of regulation. And in particular, it's a very gray area here in Europe. No? Many of the things that we could think of the innovations, could be considered medical devices, or would be questionable whether they're medical devices or not. And in particular, also the pharmaceutical industry is very worried about investing in many services, for example, in collaboration, in social networks for doctors, etc., because of the risk of comments that could actually lead to off-label prescriptions or any other thing. No? And we see that as potentially an obstacle because we cannot innovate and bring services that would be relevant for doctors because of this. No? What's your perspective on regulation, both in the US, as it is probably a lighthouse for the European regulation also?
Yeah, so this is a significant issue in innovation. This is why I believe healthcare lags behind many other areas in its innovation, is because of exactly these concerns. You mentioned other similar regulations on privacy and confidentiality and the rules that go around that make data very unliquid, undifficult to sort of put together in the healthcare practices. It is a reality. It's hard to navigate. We have the FDA at the United States also thinking exactly about this issue. When does a device become? When does an application become a medical device providing medical care and therefore need to undergo very rigorous and expensive and long delayed testing? Obviously don't have an answer for that. I believe it's been well recognized as a barrier to innovation. Whether or not we'll see, it has to be solved legislatively. Whether or not we'll see any movement on this, it's hard to say, but it has held back, it absolutely has held back healthcare relative to areas that don't have this issue. Whether or not it can come from the consumer side and therefore be driven as a consumer, and therefore sort of the idea of given permission, the activated patient given permission, is an interesting workaround. I just don't know whether that's going to be a large enough movement to really change policy. Just don't know.
Unfortunately, we need to move forward in the agenda, but I hope you could have the opportunity to speak with him in the coffee break.